Okay, now see the friction force. How we can define here, when the two bodies are in contact and if there is a tendency of relative motion or relative motion between the contacting surface, then only the friction force act. So we can say when two surfaces are in contact, and there is a tendency of relative motion, or relative motion between the two surfaces is there. So when two surfaces are in contact and there is a tendency of relative motion or relative motion between the surfaces are there, then only friction force act. So most important point here, there are 2 points. One is there is a tendency of relative motion. Tendency of relative motion means body is at rest, body is not moving, but it has a tendency. How we can get tendency, that we will discuss. And another point is that relative motion. It means in these two conditions, either it should have tendency, even motion is not there, but tendency is there. Or if it has a relative motion, then only the friction force act. And now, the friction force always act. The friction force always act opposite to direction of either tendency of motion, or relative motion. It means friction force always act opposite to direction of either tendency of motion or relative motion. First, we would like to clarify what is the meaning of tendency of motion. See, for example, this is a body, it is kept on a surface. This body is kept on a surface. Now, if anyone is asking either this body have tendency of motion or not, simply we can say this body does not have any tendency, because if I am looking here the forces, one weight of the body, another your normal force, and body is kept on a horizontal surface, it is unable to move because the surface is rigid, it cannot go up and down. So mg is equal to n. So it does not have any motion in the vertical direction and in the horizontal direction. If we are looking in the horizontal direction, right now in the horizontal direction there is no force. See, as per the law of inertia, body can change their state only when some external forces are acting or some forces are acting. Right now if we are looking here, in the horizontal direction there is no force acting. If no force acting, then how the body can have motion, first of all, or how can we say it has some tendency of motion? See, how the tendency will develop? Tendency will develop when we applying a certain force. Suppose now if we are applying a force in the horizontal direction, then the body should move in the horizontal direction, but it is not moving, suppose. So it is not moving, but because of this force, it has a tendency of motion. So this is the meaning of tendency of motion. The tendency of motion means on a body, forces are acting in a particular direction. So because of that forces, it have tendency to move, but still it is not moving. Then it is called tendency of motion. And now, if it start moving, then we can say simply the motion of the body is relative motion. Now it start moving. So always there is two possibility, two condition. One, because of some forces, body can have tendency of motion, or because of forces, it can have motion also. So now on the basis of these two parameters, we can differentiate or we can divide friction force in a two category. So see, on the basis of either tendency of motion, on the basis of either tendency of motion or relative motion okay, on the basis of either tendency of motion or relative motion, friction force can be categorized or can be divided in two parts. Can be divided in two parts. So on the basis of either tendency of motion or relative motion, friction force can be divided into two parts. First is your static friction. And another is called your kinetic or dynamic friction. Kinetic or dynamic friction. So first we will discuss about the static friction. So now see the static friction.